Was at that point trying to hustle, trying to find out. He used to make sukari gulu. If anybody knows sukari gulu, do you know sukari gulu? This is hardened sugar, and he used to make that and sell it. And they changed sukari gulu to waragi. Waragi is alcohol, right? Yeah. So it's local alcohol. So he used to make local alcohol.
One that's like Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, as you can see, we have a guest. Actually, this gentleman we just met, I believe last week. When was it?
Like Friday?
Wow.
Today is Tuesday. We met Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, I was thinking Thursday. Actually, the story goes I was sitting right there minding my own business as I always do, and we live in Vancouver, and they always say Vancouver is not a very friendly city, so keep that in mind. And I was just immersed in my computer, and here comes this gentleman and say, "Excuse me, do you have 5 minutes?" Right?
Exactly that. I said, "Hey, how are you? You have 5 minutes to talk to me." And you seemed a little reluctant, in the beginning. You're like, "Who is this person?" But that's what I have no shame in approaching people because I think we're supposed to connect. So
Yeah, and I have to be a bit reluctant because um, I live in Vancouver, so there's always this: who is talking to me? What do you want? And also, I've lived in Canada for too long, guys. It's not like I'm from Rwanda. When I go to Rwanda, people are so approachable, and I always have to switch. However, as you can see, we have made a connection, and we have so much to share about his background. And it's one of the person that have always wanted to actually have this type of conversation. And I know he is from Africa. And so let's jump into it. Please introduce yourself.
So my name is Meet. Yeah, my name is Meet Doara, and where do I start? I mean, I was born in India. Soon after I was born in India, my dad was working at Mumia Sugar, which is in Kenya, a very small village. So I remember getting there. My mom didn't know how to get there, and after delivery, my dad didn't even come to pick us up. He's just like, "Here's the ticket. You show up. I have work." And we came to Mumias. Summary is we lived there for 3 years as my dad was figuring it out, and then we moved to Uganda when I was like 5, and then have lived in Uganda ever since until 19, and then I came to Canada to study. I went to University of Victoria, and then I studied, and here I am, trying to get or like go through this Western world and just question what I'm here for.
All right. All right. Okay. Welcome. So you heard you heard him born in India and lived in Kenya. Unasema Kiswahili?
Kidogo kidogo tu, unajua sasa mimi mutu ya Mumias. Eh? So there was no way. Apana, it's broken because I think Swahili requires practice. When I was in Mumias, my whole language was Swahili. Then I moved to Uganda. Now they don't speak Swahili as much in Uganda. Now when I went to school, they're like English, English, English. And so I still have friends. I try and speak Swahili. I think I need to learn it better.
Unasema Kiswahili kidogo na mimi Kiswahili yangu na iko broken, eh? If I can say that. So okay. All right. So born in India, then you moved to Kenya, and then later you went to India. So timeline wise, when did your parents arrive in India? I mean, in Uganda.
In Kenya first.
Okay, Kenya. So give us that timeline.
So what happened is my dad got married, and then he moved to Kenya. He was one of 11. He was the youngest boy, and nobody there had traveled out of the small village that they lived in. My dad was an explorer. He was the only one in the family that has ever been to Nepal. He just left and went to Nepal, stayed there for like 6 months, came back. Now he's got married, and it hit him that damn, he's married. My mom's pregnant. He has a kid on the way. He leaves. He says, "I have a friend at GM Sugar in Uganda, and I can get a job in Kenya." So now he finds a friend, gets him a job in Kenya in Mumia Sugar, And so now he's working there, and then 6 months later, like I'm born, he's like, okay, he comes back to India, visits. My grandpa was very, very unhappy how he dealt with the whole situation. He left my mom. My mom was very unhappy. Oh my God. She was about to like, that's what she says. She was about to like file a divorce. Like, how can you leave me after marrying me? That was my mom's reaction. And then basically he goes back to Kenya and he's like, I'm going to earn money, send you guys a ticket. So I was in India for like a good 8 months, until I was able to get a passport. Even then, getting a passport because I'm deep, deep in the village. Shags, they call it in Kenya. Shags.
So great. So because when you mentioned when you landed in Kenya and went to Uganda, I just want to have the timeline because it's very historically important for the context of this. Because with what happens during the Dada when he kicked out
Yes.
the Asians, I think included were part of that. So I'm trying to just have this sort of timeline put in our mind so that when we know, okay, when your dad landed in Uganda, in Kenya first, what year? For sure, Moi was already the man because he was there for years.
Yeah.
But then when he went to Uganda, was that during a Museveni time? So what are the years are we talking about?
So he came to Kenya in 98, end of 98, beginning of 99. And by that time, now we came to Kenya in 2000, lived there for 2 years. 2003 is when my dad moved to Uganda. And then he lived there for like 3 months until we also moved in 2003. And then since 2003 to 2018, I was in Uganda. My parents are still there till now. My dad's actually a Ugandan citizen. He has the Ugandan passport because he's been there for such a long time. His businesses are based there. So now he's just like, it makes sense for him to be a Ugandan citizen.
That is good to know actually, because I landed in Kenya in 1997 myself, but it didn't last long. I left. I don't think I was as brave as your dad. I hope I'm not as young as I'm not the same age. But anyway, so I was there.
Actually, think you're the same age. So I am 26, and my dad had me when he was 20. So he is 46.
Damn, did you have to say that? Anyway, okay. 47 this year. Wow, cool. Wow. I'm old, so your dad survived where I could not. Ha. So we're about the same age when we were in Kenya and so on. Now, from yeah, from Kenya, Nairobi. Did you live in Nairobi? Okay, so I just want us to just take time and just tell us about your arrival in Africa when you were a baby, but then growing up. How was it? What was the experience for you there? And of course, there's a bunch of questions. I mean, I have not lived in Uganda, but I've lived in Kenya briefly, and I was in Rwanda. And so my observation of the Indian community in Rwanda, it was they were pretty much isolated from us. I mean, they stick to their own. That's pretty much it. We see them when we either went to work. But interesting enough, one of my family's good friend, like family friend, was actually a mixed race kid. I think the mother was Rwandan and the father was perhaps from India, if not Pakistan, but I think it's India. Mm-hmm. Anyways, so that's other than listening and watching a lot of Bollywood movies, that's as much as Indian knowledge I have, like closer to me.
Yeah. So I guess your experience is not false because that's now that I like try and look back, it is true. Indians are they stay to themselves, but that's I think the older age, the previous generation. Because I remember when I was growing up, there was a group of Indian community, a bunch of Indian people that lived in Mumia Sugar, worked from Mumia Sugar, and the housing was provided. So all of my neighbors were Indian people. Funny enough, lucky, unlucky, who knows? But there were no kids my age where I was in that society, in that housing that I was given. There was no kids my age. So like I probably had one friend who was Indian. And then I remember going to school and, you know, um, making my first friends. That's something my mom, even now when I talk to her, she told me at first it was very new to her. She had never been out of India in her life. So she had never seen, anybody else. She was aware she's a little educated, so she knew there were black people, white people, but this can be a cultural shock. When I told when my grandpa was telling me the first time, like because where I come from in India, this is important background, there is a city called Jambur, right? If you Google Jambur, Uganda, you will find out that they are actually African Indians. They look exactly like you, but the culture, the language they speak, what they eat is exactly Indian. You can Google it. And that's the one city. I live 10 minutes away from that city. So my mom kind of knew that, okay, there are these people that like have the black skin color. At that time there's no internet. So there's no way of her educating, of her getting to know things unless you read it on a newsletter. And I'm talking about villages. This village where, like, you want to get from one side of the town to another, like, there's no cars. You gotta walk. There's a bicycle. You know, all of these things. So I'm giving you perspective on where she came from. And now that come here, my mom tried to first protect me, saying, "Be careful." Or like, I think that was, she had mother nature. She was not familiar. But me, I went to school, and now I am growing up, and I understand. There's this kid who used to like to make fun of Indian kids, right? So he got a grasshopper. I was very afraid of grasshoppers. Right. So he'd catch a grasshopper and he'd always bring it to my face, and I would start crying. Yeah, and then I realized, well, you don't realize, but then I realized that there's a power dynamic that plays here. And so the power dynamic is I made a friend called Jemba, and he was this a little muscular Kenyan. Yeah, some Kenyans from a young age, they're very muscular. I don't know what they're eating, but I became friends with Jemba, and Jemba protected me from this guy who was threatening me with a grasshopper all the time. And I remember my mom coming for teacher parent conference. I see Jemba and I'm hugging him, and we're friends and we're playing together. And my mom's like, "Who is that?" I'm like, "Mom, that's Jemba, my friend." And then she went home and she's like, my mom thought about it, I think, where she was like, she cannot just shield me because this is my environment. And so I still remember, like, me and Jemba had a very strong friendship. At that time, the only things to play with at lunchtime were tires. You would get out, put a stick in between a tire, and run with the tire, and the tire would run. So every time I would go and get a tire, that guy with the grasshopper would come scare me to steal my tire. And Jemba was the one to protect me.
It's quite amazing that you had a friend, Jemba, that was looking after you, because we all need such a friend. So if Jemba sees this, or anyone, I don't know if it's a pretty common name. Big shout out to you. I know it's been a while, but you never know. Memories never fades, especially those special ones. So Nairobi in Kenya. It was in Nairobi, right?
No, it was Mumias.
Mumias. Okay. Where is that? Is that like south, north?
West. It's west, very close to Uganda, which is what made my dad think of Uganda, to go to Uganda.
Yeah, that is good, because each time we talk about the city, the towns in Africa, it's good to kind of give that location, because most people, they may not know the geography.
If you don't know, there's a place called Kakamega, which is pretty famous. That's where we went to do our groceries. So Kakamega is a bigger city than Mumias.
The Kenyans we know. Because even I was like, I lived in Nairobi, and then I went to Machakos. And then I went to Mombasa somewhere. That's as far as I know in Kenya. So now from Memas, you moved to Uganda. So how is life? And so where were you? Were you in Kampala? So now take us to Kampala. Tell us briefly about growing up there and then moving here as well. So draw that sort of the picture, the challenges. How was it? What was your the impression you had when you moved from a master and you went to Uganda. Like me, I moved from Kinshasa, went to Kigali. Still remember, was like, is this a village from Kinshasa, which is like a metropolitan city? I've always lived in city, so yeah. So tell us about that.
So actually, from Mumias, I remember a brief period of 6 months where I moved to Eldoret. So that was my first introduction to a big city, and where my dad was working on the side, and then he moved to Jinja. Jinja is, I would say, the second biggest city in Uganda, and that's where the source of the Nile is. That's what it's known for. The Nile starts in Jinja, and so living in Jinja was a very, it's not a village, it's suburban, it's very quiet. And you'd always, from Ginger, you'd always hear about Kampala this, Kampala that. There's borders, there's bikes, but in Ginger, there's only these bicycles. Everywhere you want to go to, it's called a bicycle. Right. So lived there, did my beginning primary school there. So I did school in Ginger, and then I think also stayed there for 3 years, and then we moved on to Kampala. And that switch I found was the biggest difference for me between Jinja and Kampala, because Jinja was very suburban to Kampala now, where there is actual traffic. Seeing that much human traffic, cars was, and I lived in a place called Kiseka Market, a market full of mechanics. So you can be walking out, and then there are like mechanics everywhere. And mechanics are hard people. Yeah, mechanics are not easy people. So yeah. Anyways, I stayed in Kampala. Later on in life we moved, but I stayed in Kiseka Market, which I feel is what taught me a lot of things. So living in Kiseka Market, my dad, yeah, and yeah. Anyways, that was my. Then I grew up. You know, I went to a school called Jaffrey, then Aga Khan. Then after Aga Khan is pretty famous in our Kampala. And then after that, I went to Rainbow International School. That was the last 3 years before I graduated. And yeah, from there in 2016, I graduated and I come to Canada with all these dreams. Oh my God, I'm going to see this white people, da 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 da. And then you come here and you realize, hey, everyone thinks here is gold. Everybody is walking. To be honest, it's very clean. It's very organized, but that organization also has its ups and downs. It's not always good. It's very expensive. You might think, what, this person here is earning 3 million Ugandan shillings. That's a good life, but you're spending 2 million Ugandan shillings just like that if you're not careful. So,
But just can you convert, because 3 million Ugandan shillings? So how much is that in Canadian dollars?
so one Canadian dollar is about 2,800 Ugandan shillings. So you might be like, minimum wage you can get 1,500 Canadian dollars, which is about 4 million. That is a lot of money in Uganda. But also to get a home, you need to pay $600-700 here. That's about 2 million. So you're paying 2 million for a home in Uganda. You know how luxury you might be living if you're paying 2 million in rent.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that in my head. One question, actually, I wanna do a. Maybe you can come and partake into this. I was thinking about the content, and I was like, would you rather have $1 million USD here, or 1 million USD somewhere in Africa? So that's gonna be something that I was trying to kind of compare. I mean, I was trying to think the local currency, but 1 million shillings and 1 million Canadian dollars. Well, there's a big disparity. Yeah. So let's just use US dollar and then see who would live better. So that's one thing we'll talk about. So now you're in Kampala. I believe it feels like we should have another part two, but you are working on something, and we're gonna talk more. And guys they can always let us know if you wanna see more of the amazing gentleman here, because he has such an amazing story, and son of Africa, amazing. So when we met, you were asking some suggestions. You want to create content, of course, but you talked about the business that you are working on. I don't know if it's public yet or if you wanna announce it. Just Now is the time.
Sure, sure. Like, to me, honestly, I don't believe in like a launch. I need to talk my ideas out. I need to get my message out there so that people can inform me how to build it. That's what, and that requires talking. So, anyways, the business I'm trying to open is I'm still working with it, but it's getting food products. So my dad personally has been in the food industry. Sukari Gulu requires sugarcane. From sugarcane, like he went to sugar, and then right now he does another where he gets beans, millet. Stores this in a warehouse and then sells it to Tanzania and Uganda when there's shortage. So supply and demand. So I've been exposed to the food in Uganda. Honestly, you come here, you're gonna find every food. But when I go to Uganda, the first thing I do is eat a pineapple, avocado, watermelon. That quality. Trust me, guys, you cannot get it here. Eat that food, enjoy it, because you can be on the street and somebody's just walking with a wheelbarrow of pineapple that you cannot find here. And that pineapple, the way it tastes, sweet. I've never tasted. I hate pineapple here because when I go to Uganda, that's the first thing I eat. And honestly speaking, it's the land. I believe the land is so fertile because it's not been like, I mean, the weather is really good. Uganda is in the equator, receives rainfall throughout the year, fertile land. So, anyways, the goal is to get food products, avocados, avocado oil, cocoa, and like cocoa products, macadamia products, which grow really well and in abundance in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and then package them to meet the health conscious community in North America.
Um, all right. Yeah. I mean, I agree with the food. We can talk about that as well. I'm surprised you not said the matoke. I know Uganda is familiar with the matoke.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm very salty. I like the salt. So I prefer posho and beans always over the matoke because matoke is too sweet for me.
All right. You heard them, man. This guy is really Ugandan, guys. Yeah. So launching, yes, food process, bring food here. That is a really good project, demanding. Let's get to the end. Of course, there's so much to talk about, and we can break it in its own length um, discussion. But so, having been here, and there's a lot of people watching. I know in my audience, young people who dream to come to Canada, who um, maybe people from India who are looking to go and settle in Africa. Because Indians are everywhere, just
Yeah.
like Chinese people and Nigerians. Any place you go, you always see a Chinese, Nigerian, and an Indian. So tell us, yeah, what would you say to anyone, young one from Uganda or anywhere in Africa thinking of coming here? And anything else you want to add so that the global African diaspora knows, just educate us on something or how we can better bridge the gap between black Indian, black Africans, and non-black Africans, right?
Yeah.
If I so say.
So I'll start with the first part of your question, which was what would I say to the younger generation? I'm also young. I'm still young, not like. um, Honestly, one of the lessons that I still is very close to my heart, and I say it every time, is that you know what? You don't need to be talented. The truth about the world that I've found personally is you don't need to really be smart. You need to be able to work. Just be able to put in more effort than anybody else. Just get there and work, and you can figure out anything. You can become the best social media manager, or you can become a business owner just by putting in work. You don't need to, be gifted about talking to people. You can learn everything. So as well as you put in work, you will figure it out. That I'm an engineer by trade, and honestly, I'm not that good at books. I can't read. I can't stay in a book for 6 hours. That's not me. But I figured that if you just worked a bit consistently, you could get a degree. So you don't have to be super smart to get a degree, which I thought as a young kid, that, hey, yo, can I actually get this degree? But I don't think so. And For I guess the second part, which is Indians who are whose identity is related to Africa, or Indians wanting to move to Africa, it's the most underexplored, unexplored part of the world. Like, because I truly believe, sure, there's more opportunities in North America, but I, I I still tell this to my parents. I want to retire back in Uganda because the health, the food, the like what you can do in Uganda, the freedom. That's a big part. There's a pro and a con. There's a lot of corruption in African countries, but the truth is there's also a lot of freedom. And so you have to go there. You have to explore. It's not actually. I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, "How scary must it be to live in Uganda?" And I'm like, every part of the world is scary. If you go to Hastings, there's a street here called Hastings. If you go there, you're not going to feel safe, right? But if you go to Uganda, I promise you, you're not going to just die. If you go to Kenya, it's safe. But be informed. Do your due diligence. Get informed, and there's nothing that if you go to Kenya and you talk to anybody, first of all, they're all English speakers. So if somebody thinks they're going to have language barrier, ain't no way. Everybody speaks English. You will be able to communicate. And then once you start talking to people, you realize you have a lot more in common. These are the same people that work, that they need money, they have families, they have feelings, they have all these things. So there's much more than you might think. So I highly recommend, if you can make a trip, actually just go do a safari. It will, it's something that's in a lot of people's bucket lists, why they come to East Africa, but then you understand the culture. Indulge in some local food, indulge in talking to them. You'll actually see how warm. I can mostly talk for Uganda. Ugandans are warm. I think Kenyans are like hard workers, but Ugandans are very warm, very slow people, and it's a lifestyle. So
Well, thank you. I was gonna say must be the Waragi. Thank you. It was a pleasure having you. And
thank you
so
for having me.
and we shall maybe have another discussion in the future.